So to start off, I'll do a rough pencil sketch. So I'll put in this first boat here. And the second boat somewhere here. And I'll put in a figure here just to add a bit of interest to the painting. So person just looking at the boats. And his pet dog as well. Yep. So and the mast, the two, so I'll put in them. A few bits and pieces here, just I'll mostly focus on them whilst painting, so nothing much to worry. These are just abstract shapes, so just a few pencil lines to denote. Yep, so that should do. Just a rough pencil drawing to get things started off. So I'll mix a bit of a pale blue and start at the top. And I'll mix a bit of a warm green, so I'll use a bit of Viridian and a bit of a cadmium yellow orange to get that warm saturated green. Needs a bit more water in there. Yep, and I'll try to leave a bit of white space for the mast. I could have used a bit of masking fluid as well, but yeah, I prefer to use my brush this time. So yeah, sometimes it might not work as well, but it's all right. So the purpose of today's demo is to demonstrate how we can paint negative shapes in watercolor with by leaving a white paper to denote the lighter shapes. So watercolor is a great medium for negative shapes. So I'm using Bohong paper today, which is a kind of a bright white paper. I usually use Saunders, but for today's demo I thought of using Bohong, which is a bright white compared to Saunders paper. So the shapes, the negative shapes that I leave behind would look much brighter in this paper. So I completely fill in using this green. There are a few lighter areas here. That's all right. It's too complicated to leave whites there. just a dry brush stroke to finish off that green. A little bit of green there, and yep, so that should do. And I'll use the blue that I mixed earlier for the sky and add that bit of green and maybe a bit more blue in there to come up with a nice gray. And I use a bit of use the rough texture of the paper to create these dry brush strokes. I painted around these two boats, so I'm relying on the technique of negative shapes to come up with this boat. So the next step, what I'm going to do is, whilst the saturated pale green is still wet, I'm going to put in the dark green as well. So I'll use the same green that I used before, Viridian. Need a lot of green in there. And some burnt sienna into it. Need a bit more green. I'm using Holbein Viridian. So Viridian is a pure pigment green, so the brand of the green doesn't really matter because it's a pure pigment. So whilst it's still wet, I'll just drop in this green as well, the darker green. So as you can see, the darker green only spreads up to where the paper is wet. It won't go into the white paper because it's dry. So if I leave a mark here, it will only spread up to where the paper is wet. So that's something it's something that we can make use of when painting wet on wet. So I'm not really worried whether the darker green would go into the white paper. It will not. Bit more dark green here as well. Yep. And I'll use a smaller brush to cut around these shapes here. Again, I need to be very careful that I get a nice edge around the boat. Yep. And a few trees in the background. I forgot to leave a white space when I was painting the blue, so that's something that I need to fix later. Either I'll use a bit of gouache, or yeah, I'll think about it later when the rest of the painting is dry. now I need to think what else can I do whilst it's still wet. I'll drop a bit of a cobalt blue in a few areas to make things a bit more darker. A bit here. And I'll just connect these two with that blue so that the white doesn't stand on its own. Bit more blue in there. Yep, so that should be enough. I'm just going overboard with it. I just need to stop myself. Yep, that should be it. Right. So, what I'll paint next is this particular boat. So it's got a nice warm white. So I'll use a bit of yellow ochre, really diluted, and just start putting in this. Here. And I'll use the same color for this particular boat as well. Whilst it's still wet, I'll drop in a bit of a blue here and let it mix with the yellow ochre. Whilst it's drying, I'll just move on to this particular figure here. I'll give him a... The light is falling from left to right, so I'll give him a nice blue striped t-shirt and a dark pair of trousers. All very abstract, and I'll put in the shadow for them as well. Right, so what I'll do next is, I'll use a penknife and try to, I'm not quite sure whether it has dried enough for this particular technique, but I'll just give it a go and see whether I can lift some pigment off here. Yeah, it's a bit, never mind, it should be fine. So I'll lift some more here as well, and I need a white line here as well. Yeah, beautiful. And I lost a bit of light here as well. I'll use the penknife to get that as well. And yep. Now it's time to put in this blue. And I'll use the same blue here as well. So it's, and make it a bit more dark. I'm using ultramarine blue. And try to put in the area and the shade as well. It's fuzzing a bit with the wet paper, that's all right. I don't mind at all. So right, so I've done pretty much all the things that I wanted to do while the paper was wet. So what I'll do next is I'll dry this completely and add the finishing touches. Alright, so now it's completely dry, and only issue that I have at this moment is that I forgot to leave white space when I was painting the blue. So what I'm going to do now is, the paper is completely dry. I'll just wet only that area here as well, and use a tissue to just lift a bit of pigment. As you can see, a bit of white has appeared because I only wet the paper where I need it, and the tissue is only lifting the pigment from where I have wet the paper. Yeah, so that's much better. So I'll leave it like that and move to the rest of the painting where, so all the negative painting is pretty much done. So we have painted negatively here to show the boat, same here. So now it's time to put in the darks underneath the boats and connect the shapes together and finish it off. So these darks would help to connect all the shapes together and make it into a complete painting. So I need a bit of lavender in there, just to and a bit of writing on the side of the boat. Yep, so that's pretty much what I wanted to do. A few more details in here, just some bits and pieces. And I'll use a bit of a pale blue just to put in a shadow here as well, so that this reads much better. It's not pure white, so yeah, just a bit of blue here and there. And we'll add a bit of interest using a bit of red mixed with a bit of burnt sienna. Yep, so that should do. So I just need a few kind of shadows or dark areas in the trees as well. So I'm mixing a bit of the same mix, burnt sienna with a bit of viridian, just to add a bit more decisive brush strokes, just to make this negative shape pop even a bit more. That looks pretty good. This needs to be a bit more darker, yeah. So what I wanted to demonstrate is how we can make use of negative shapes when painting in watercolor. Watercolor is a great medium for painting negative shapes, and as you can see, the white paper that we left behind kind of pops out when we put in this nice dark background next to it. So hope you enjoyed this demo. Just give it a go and see how it turns out. If you are a beginner in watercolor, it's better if you use some masking fluid to reserve your whites. But if you are confident enough, just go ahead and paint it with a brush. So hope you enjoyed this demo. Please subscribe to my channel and hope to see you in another video. Thank you.